Our family has always had a small, cozy vacation cabin tucked away in the snowy mountains of Colorado. My parents, passionate skiers, bought the property long before I was born, drawn by its proximity to some of the best slopes. The cabin now, over 40 years old, carries the charm of its age along with the wear and tear that comes with it. Over the years, my dad has done his best to maintain it, but its age shows and talks of rebuilding often come up. This story takes place about 15 years ago, during one of those magical yet treacherous Colorado blizzards. I was 8, and my older brother Ethan was 11. As kids, those snowy days were an invitation to play outside, no matter how deep the drifts piled up. Our family's property was expansive, with an open field surrounded by dense woods, perfect for games like hide-and-seek and snowball fights. That day, Ethan and I decided to play one of our favorite games, a snowball battle where each of us built a fort and tried to steal a treasure, a large snowball, from the other's base. Ethan picked his fort on a neighboring property, one that belonged to a rarely visited cabin down the road. Since the neighbors were almost never there, we often used the space for our adventures. I stayed back to build my fort while Ethan ran down the road to set up his. He was supposed to signal me with a whistle when he was ready. I waited, watching the snowflakes dance through the air, but the whistle never came. After about 10 minutes, I started to worry. Maybe I just didn't hear it through the howling wind. I decided to head toward his fort to check. The woods were too eerie during the blizzard, so I stuck to the road, trudging through the thick, unplowed snow. When I reached the neighboring property, I spotted Ethan's fort, but something was off. He wasn't there. I called his name, but the only response was the muffled sound of the storm. I walked closer, scanning the area, when a voice startled me. "Are you looking for your brother?" a woman's voice called out. I turned to see an older woman standing on the front porch of the cabin. She smiled warmly, but something about her seemed off. Her smile was too wide, too forced. She told me my brother wasn't there and gestured for me to come inside to warm up. At that moment, my stomach dropped. I didn't recognize her, and I had never seen anyone at that cabin before. As I hesitated, I caught movement from one of the upstairs windows. Someone was watching me, a figure partially obscured by a black hat, their face just barely visible over the window frame. I glanced down and noticed footprints leading to the house. They looked like Ethan's boots, but something didn't add up. The tracks doubled back, leading toward the woods, as if he had left in a hurry. My heart raced as I realized the situation felt increasingly wrong. The woman's expression shifted when I didn't move closer. Her smile faded and she repeated, "Come inside. It's too cold out there." Before I could respond, heavy footsteps echoed from inside the house, coming from the upstairs. My instincts screamed at me to run. I turned and bolted down the driveway, shouting Ethan's name. As I reached the road, I heard my dad's familiar whistle from up the hill. Relief washed over me as I saw both him and Ethan standing in our driveway. I ran straight to them, breathless, trying to explain what had just happened. Before I could even get the words out, Ethan interrupted, saying, "Someone at the cabin told me to come inside too." My dad's face darkened. Without hesitation, he grabbed a shovel from the garage and headed down the road. He told us to stay inside with our mom while he checked it out. When he returned, he explained that the house appeared empty. The front door was locked, but the back door had been left ajar. Concerned, he went to a neighbor's house and called the property owners. What we learned still sends chills down my spine. The owners of the cabin confirmed that no one was supposed to be there that weekend. They immediately called the police. When officers arrived, they found no one in the house, but the snowstorm had erased any footprints leading away. That was the last time we ever played near that cabin. Even now, the memory of that woman's unsettling smile and the shadowy figure at the window makes my skin crawl. I'm just grateful my brother and I trusted our instincts and never stepped foot inside. Every winter, my friends Ryan, Luke, and I have this tradition. It's nothing fancy, just a late-night walk onto the frozen lake near Hollow Creek, a secluded spot a few towns away. It's our escape, a moment of stillness where the world feels quieter. The wind sweeps across the ice, and the moonlight dances on the snow. It's like being in another world, away from life's noise. This tradition wasn't new. It's been our thing for years. Ryan always brings his camera, saying the snowy landscape looks like a dream. But this past winter, everything changed. It was late February, and the temperature had been freezing for weeks. The lake was solid, and the snow had a cinematic feel. That night, Luke drove us in his old Jeep, the forest around the lake giving it an isolated feel. When we parked near the trailhead, I joked that it felt like we were in a horror movie. Little did I know how close that would come to being true. Bundled up, we made our way toward the lake. The snow crunched beneath our boots, the only sound on an otherwise silent night. It was nearly midnight, and the world felt deserted. No animals, no other people. Just us. At the edge of the lake, Ryan tossed a chunk of ice, confirming the thickness of the ice. We laughed, shoving each other as we wandered onto the frozen expanse, the cold biting at our faces. We hadn't been on the ice long, maybe 15 minutes, when something caught our attention on the far side of the lake. A dark shape moved among the trees, big and slow. My first thought was a deer, but as it got closer, I realized it was too bulky. Luke whispered, "What is that?" And we froze, staring at the figure. It was hunched, moving awkwardly toward the ice. For a moment, I thought it was a bear, but the way it moved didn't feel natural. It was too uneven, too human-like. Then, it straightened up, and we saw what it really was, a person wearing a strange oversized coat with fur-like material. In the dim light, it almost looked like a poorly made bear costume. I couldn't make sense of it. Why would someone be out here in the middle of the night dressed like that? The figure dragged a black bag behind them, a rope wrapped around their gloved hand. My stomach dropped. The figure stopped near the middle of the lake and picked up a large object, maybe a rock or ice. They slammed it into the frozen surface, the sound echoing across the lake. They were trying to break the ice. Luke tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "We need to leave. Now." We turned to head back to shore, trying to be as quiet as possible. Every step felt deafening in the stillness. We had barely made it a few steps when a voice rang out, "Hey!" It was deep, sharp, and menacing. We froze. Then Luke whispered, "Run." We bolted. Our hearts pounded, breaths coming short as we ran through the snow. I didn't dare look back, afraid to see if the figure was following. All I could hear was our boots hitting the snow and my own frantic heartbeat. We reached the car, scrambled inside, and slammed the doors shut. Luke started the engine and drove away, not looking back. None of us spoke. We were too shaken, too scared to process what had just happened. Weeks later, I was scrolling through the news when I found a missing persons case from a town near Hollow Creek. A boy had vanished last winter, and the timeline matched perfectly with that night. My stomach sank. Had we seen someone trying to cover up a crime? We reported it to the police, but I don't know if they'll find anything. All I know is that I'll never go back to Hollow Creek, and I'll never step foot on that frozen lake again. I've been skiing since I could walk. My parents met through competitive skiing, so skiing was in my blood. This story happened when I was 21, during a trip to Vermont with my friends, Jaden, Ryland, Amir, and I. We were at one of the biggest resorts in the area, skiing for 2 full days, racing down slopes and having a great time. On the second day, we had an hour left before the lifts closed, and that's when we met them, Taylor and Devin. They were 2 stunningly beautiful girls who caught our attention instantly. They approached us, complaining about the older crowd on the mountain, and we started chatting. They offered us some alcohol, and we, of course, didn't refuse. Devin pulled out a bottle that didn't have any labels, and we all took swigs. I noticed Jaden looked a little off after drinking, but I didn't think much of it. They told us about a trail called Devil's Forest, a glade trail not many people knew about. Curious, we followed them up a hill, away from the lifts. The walk was odd, and I started to feel uneasy, but we continued. Once we were in the forest, the girls urged us to drink more, and it didn't take long before Ryland and Amir passed, out in the snow. Then Jaden followed. My head was spinning, and I was scared I was next. I barely managed to sit down in the snow and looked up to see the girls standing there, unmoving. They didn't even acknowledge me as I demanded to know what was happening. Eventually, they grabbed Ryland and Amir's skis and started walking off. They were taking them, and I was too dizzy to stop them. I struggled to get up, but my body was sluggish. I finally started to follow them, but they had gained too much distance. I saw a van ahead with a group of men stepping out. I realized I had made a huge mistake. I turned back, retracing my steps through the snow. I found Jaden, barely conscious, and I managed to wake him up. We tried to rouse Amir and Ryland, but they were out cold. After waiting for what felt like forever, they finally woke up. We were still in the middle of nowhere, and I had no idea who those girls or the men in the van were, but I knew we were lucky to escape. We made our way back to the car, shaken. The police never found the girls or the men, and we couldn't figure out what kind of drug they had slipped us. We still don't know what their intentions were, but we've all avoided that mountain since.